He's in room 202. May I help you? Yes, you can tell us where room 202 is?
Visiting hours begin at 1 o'clock.
Visiting hours don't interest me. I'm not visiting. Never mind, we'll find it ourselves. Come on, boys.
If you don't mind.
But I do mind, you see. I mind very much my grandfather being slowly murdered by a quack doctor. That's why I'm here, to get him out while he's still alive. Come on.
I'm not leaving.
Who talked you into coming to this place, Grandpa?
Catherine, the last person talked me into anything was you talking me into going to the hospital.
Which is where you belong.
Which is where I was for a month. Dying an inch every day, till I hardly had the strength to lift up a newspaper. Lucky I had that strength, or I never would have read about Dr. Simon and Sylvan Hill and how he guarantees to cure you, or it doesn't stand you a penny.
Grandpa, Dr. Branby is a quack.
Ah, would that be Miss Callender? Well, this is indeed an unexpected pleasure. I understand that you were in New York when your grandfather decided to join us here at Sylvan Hill.
Well, this won't take long. 2 suitcases in the closet. Ed, Borges, you load up his things. I shall get him dressed.
Right away, Miss Callender. Excuse me. Are you leaving us, Jedediah?
No, I'm not leaving you. Catherine!
We'll talk about this on the way back to the hospital, Grandpa.
Jedediah, I'll pack your things. Miss McAllister here will see that your bill is put together.
You're going to do nothing like that, either of you. I'm staying put right here where I belong. Now, Catherine, you listen to me. Dr. Simon said he'd cure me, and I believe him. I'm going to stay right here till he does. Now, you and your foreman and your wrangler here, get out. Take care of your own affairs and let me take care of mine.
Is there anything you'd like to have me add to your grandfather's remarks, Miss Callender?
I am taking my grandfather out of here, whether he knows enough to go or not.
Miss Smythe, would you get me the sheriff's station, please? Sergeant, Dr. Brandy, Sylvan Hill. There are 3 people here attempting to remove one of my patients against his will. Would you be kind enough to come up and arrest them? Thank you. Unless, of course, you prefer to leave. Before they get here.
sent me a clerk. Where are Horton, Troy, Carroll, Clark, and McNeil?
Well, I'm with the firm. You care to sit down?
Who's got to die before your name goes on the door?
Nobody. We just have to use up all the old envelopes first. Now, can you tell me exactly what happened? I understand Dr. Branby has filed a complaint against you.
He's filed a complaint. I'm the one with the complaint. Do you know what that quack is doing not only to my grandfather, but to about 50 or 60 other poor gullible fools? Now, when do I get to file my complaint?
Well, unfortunately, Miss Callender...
Oh, call me Kate. The hands call me Miss Callender.
All right. Kate, he has accused you and two of your friends.
One of them's my foreman, the other's a wrangler.
He's accused you of assault with intent to do great bodily harm, of disrupting the routine of his establishment, of endangering the health of his patients.
Every word of it's absolutely true, except the part about endangering the health of his patients. He's the one who...
Miss Callender, Kate, these are very serious charges. Now, if he can prove them...
Okay, Miss Callender, you can go.
I can't.
Has the complaint been dropped?
I have dropped it, yes. Miss Callender was obviously acting out of emotion. It would be unreasonable to take advantage of her temporary instability.
Hi. We've been sprung. David Hanson, our lawyer, Ed Sessions, Borges Weems.
Dave?
What you really mean is you don't want me getting on a witness stand and telling a judge and jury all about you and that phony operation you're running, right?
Kate, Doctor, Miss Callender appreciates this very much.
She'd appreciate even more being told when she can get her grandfather out of that phony joint of yours.
That joint has no locks on the doors, nor bars on the windows, Miss Callender. At any time your grandfather feels he can no longer benefit from my services, he's perfectly free to leave. Up to now, I have not heard him register any dissatisfaction.
That's because he's too old and too sick to realize you're not just stealing his money, you're gradually killing him.
If you would care to persuade your grandfather that he'd be better off in other hands, visiting hours are from 1 to 3. Gentlemen, Miss Callender, I must get back to my patients. I'm very sorry to have caused you all this trouble. Goodbye.
The trouble you caused me is nothing next to the trouble I'm going to cause you. Do you get my message, Mr. Branby?
And would you say that he got the message?
Everybody in the room got the message. Kate, a duty officer, half a dozen deputy sheriffs, 3 or 4 other people, all heard you make threats against Branby. And that could be a problem if he wanted to do something about it.
He won't do anything about it. Nobody does anything about anything. Which brings me to the question of all of you. What were you doing while I was in New York and Grandpa was turning over a quarter of his interest in River Oaks Ranch to that quack? Well, you were supposed to be looking after the Callender interests. At least that's what we thought.
That's what we all thought, Kate. But we weren't kept posted about anything like that.
Well, now you're posted. What do you plan to do?
Well, I suppose we could try to show misrepresentation, maybe get a court order to enjoin the transfer of stock.
I don't think that's the main concern, Devlin. Branby may be robbing Jedediah, sure. But what's more important, he may also be damaging his health.
There's no maybe about it. He's killing him.
Now, wait a minute, Kate. What we need here is a dispassionate look inside Sylvan Hill and a dispassionate talk with Jedediah and this Branby character. A little persuasion, a little bargaining. Find out if Branby is possibly practicing medicine without a license, in which case we can have him closed up. David, maybe you ought to take a run out there.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I think it's a terrific idea. Let's go.
Kate, the word I used was dispassionate. You know what that means?
It's a nice lawyer's word.
Well, we are your nice lawyers, and you are paying us to give you advice, so why don't you just listen to the advice?
What's your advice?
Cool it.
How much did that just cost me?
A lot right now, hopefully less later on.
Okay. Go be dispassionate, partner. If you end up in bed next to Grandpa, give a shout and I'll show up with 2 litters.
Jedediah Jedediah Calendar, Mr. Hanson, was brought here 3 weeks ago, unable to sit up, unassisted. Now he walks, he eats and sleeps well. He looks forward to the future with hope and confidence. Why would he want to leave here?
I have no idea, Doctor. How do you do it?
Mainly acupuncture.
Mainly what?
Acupuncture, young man. A practice which has been employed in the healing arts for thousands of years, before Asclepius or even Apollo the physician. In the human body, you see, there are 365 specific spots beneath which lie the well springs of all bodily malfunction. Find the spot that controls the disease, select the appropriate needles, insert them in the body at the designated places, and the equilibrium of the patient is restored, thus vanquishing the imbalance which has caused the disease and putting him once again on the road to health.
But, doesn't it hurt?
When I talk to a patient, Mr. Hanson, he feels no pain, only love.
I see. On the subject of talking to the patient, Dr. Branby.
You, too, wish to speak with Jedediah Calendar.
On behalf of my client?
To try to persuade him to leave Sylvan Hill and entrust his life to the tender mercies of some dues-paying members of the American Medical Association?
I believe the original suggestion was yours.
Very well. I'll take you to him.
I'd rather go by myself.
You don't suppose, do you, Mr. Hanson, that I would employ hypnosis to keep him here against his wishes now, huh? Jedediah would not leave Sylvan Hill now, even if I ordered him to go. Well, see for yourself. Ask him. I am healing Jedediah. Would you leave?
And the answer's no, he won't leave. He's walking. 1 month ago, he was flat on his back, but now he's walking.
From acupuncture?
Well, he thinks so. Actually, it seems to be a temporary remission. I drove over to UCLA last night and asked them. Jedediah's gonna hobble around a few more weeks, then he'll be flat on his back, then he'll be dead forever.
And if he were in a hospital?
He'd be receiving daily injections of W14, which Dr. Branby isn't permitted to dispense because he's not a licensed physician. And he could last another 2 years if his tolerance level's high enough. But this is deliberate murder, Devlin. There's no question about it.
It is in this room. In court, it's not. The DA's office has been trying to get something on Branby for years. Every time they make a move, he slips away. Did you talk to Kate?
I drove over to River Oaks yesterday afternoon right after I left Branby.
What did she say?
Things you don't often hear ladies say.
Well, let's hope she doesn't start doing things that ladies aren't supposed to do.
David Hanson. Kate Calendar. Well, get him out of the meeting. No, I won't. David, a few of you better get on out here right away. You ready? Somebody shot Simon Branby dead as a herring, and everyone around here thinks it's me. So saddle up.
How do you feel?
I was sure your first question would be, did you do it?
Mine is.
Well, I didn't.
Kate, you made threats against him. A lot of people heard them.
So I shot off my mouth, but I didn't shoot him. What was he shot with?
That's a good question with an even better answer, David.
22 caliber long barrel revolver.
You have any guns like that at the ranch?
3.
2.
What?
According to the police, one of those guns is missing.
I didn't know that. Well, I didn't. What time was he killed?
We don't have the coroner's report yet.
Somebody must have heard the shot.
Not necessarily. A small caliber gun placed against the chest of the victim does not make too much noise.
Kate, you went to Sylvan Hill yesterday evening and demanded to see Branby. That's in a sworn statement by his assistant, Maribel McAllister.
That's right. She was in the front office. It was around 7 o'clock. I talked to Branby for about half an hour.
She also says she didn't see you leave.
She wasn't there when I left.
Who did see him?
Well, somebody must have. It was only 7:30. And Branby was alive.
What did you go there for, anyway?
Well, not to kill him.
Well, why?
Because beneath this brittle and sarcastic exterior, there beats the heart of an idiot. I offered to buy him out. That's right. All of Sylvan Hill, lock, stock, and needles for $1 million. Anything to get Grandpa out of there and into a hospital.
What did he say?
He offered me $1 million for the rest of River Oaks.
What did you do?
Called him a few filthy names and went back home.
Who saw you when you went back home?
Ed Sessions first, the cook when I ate dinner.
What time was that?
About 8:30 to 9.
After that?
Ed again from about 10:30 to 12. He, Borges Weems, and I played some three-handed poker.
How about from 9 to 10:30? You have not told us about that yet.
I went over the accounts in the ranch office.
Anyone see you?
Borges might have, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it takes an hour almost to drive from the ranch to Sylvan Hill. What did they say I did? Go and kill him by helicopter?
All right. Now, how about after the poker game? During the rest of the night?
I spent the night with friends.
What friends?
Archer, Edward, Galahad, Muscatel, Angie, and Magda.
Doing what?
Watching Magda get born.
Horses, that's right, horses. The time of death has been established between 2 and 4 a.m., during which time she claims to have been in the barn with 6 horses. No people, just horses.
We could have a beautiful murder one on our hands with a defense based on the testimony of 6 horses.
Except that the DA doesn't want to go for murder one. We got a call from his office while you two were at county jail. They're interested in plea bargaining.
They're out of their minds. It's 95% open and shut.
They won't argue with you. The point is, Branby was a 10-year thorn in the side to a lot of people, some of whom at various times seemed mad enough to kill him. The DA's office is therefore willing to see our client as having been provoked into a violent impulse.
Well, what'll they take?
Maybe manslaughter.
David, what do you think? Will she cop a plea?
She says she didn't do it.
Everybody starts out saying they didn't do it. Could she have done it?
All right, she could have done it. David, I hope it takes you a lot longer than the rest of us to see someone you have defended walk into the gas chamber and watch those pellets fall, because once you have seen that, my friend, you will suddenly become very interested in keeping the client alive, even if it means talking him into a plea.
You better go talk to her. Tell her what's being offered.
What's being offered? All right, I'll talk to her. But I can tell you right now exactly what she'll say.
You're fired.
Now, wait a second, Kate. I only...
And Horton's fired, and Troy, and Carroll, and Clark, and McNeil, and all the rest of you big, brave legal eagles who'll take calendar retainers for the past 15 years, but won't go to bat for one of them when the chips are down. I'll get the public defender or someone to take my case.
Now, just listen to me a minute, Kate. This wasn't my idea, and I'm not in favor of it. I was instructed to...
Instructed? You were instructed?
You're what I said you were in the first place. An office boy, a clerk.
A messenger, without any more guts than the rest of them.
I didn't kill that quack, and the only thing I'm pleading is not guilty.
And I don't care whether you believe me or not.
I do believe you.
I don't think you killed him.
And I don't think you should plead anything but not guilty.
And you've got every right to fire us, all of us.
I'd much rather you'd keep me. I'll resign from the firm and defend you myself.
You do that?
Yes,
Why?
I said. Because I believe you're innocent.
Why do you believe that?
Because you told me you were.
right. You are her attorney. We are not fired, and you are not resigning. Is your experience or your reading so restricted, Counselor, that you have never come across the phenomenon of an attorney's client actually being guilty?
I've heard of it. I just don't happen to think it's the case here.
Fine. Then you can defend with a clear conscience and all the advocacy at your disposal. However, in the meantime, just to keep us vaguely in the picture, how are you going to do it?
I'm going to find evidence. The Jedediah Callender wasn't the only patient of Branby's with an angry relative who would have liked to kill him. If I can find 3 other people who got mad at Branby in public, threatened him, took a swing at him, no jury's going to convict Kate.
You say you represent the family of Mr. Jedediah Callender, Mr. Kay.
Yes, you see, we're representing them so far.
There he is, right now, just coming in from his morning walk. He's making remarkable progress. Remarkable. He's, unaware, you know, of Dr. Branby's death.
He is?
I was afraid the news might set him back, so I told him Dr. Branby was on vacation. This way, please. Well, I'm not exactly sure how I can help you. Or the family of Mr. Callender. But of course, I'll be delighted to do what I can.
That's fine.
This way, please.
Well, it's really very simple, Miss McAllister, since the future of Sylvan Hill is a little uncertain as a result of Dr. Branby's death.
Oh, there's nothing uncertain about it at all. It will remain open, and the patients will continue to be treated.
Is that so? Under whose administration?
Mine. It was the express wish of Dr. Branby in his will.
You mean his will says you're supposed to keep the place running after he,
His will, Mr. K, names me as his sole beneficiary.
No kidding. That's really coming into something, isn't it?
Miss McAllister!
Mrs. Danksler, what are you doing out of your room?
Miss McAllister, would you telephone for a taxicab? I'm going to my sister's house.
Your sister lives in Garden Grove. That's a very long taxi ride.
That'll be between me and the taxicab driver, Miss McAllister. It's no worry of yours.
Why are you leaving here, Mrs. Danksler?
Because everything's different with Dr. Simon gone.
That's not true.
Oh, it's true, Miss McAllister, it's true. Yes, you can do the same things he did. Use the same words, stick those pins in the same places, but the touch is gone. When Dr. Simon did it, you'd feel warm and loved. When you do it, it's like each one of those needles was an icicle. Now, are you calling me a taxicab, or sick as I am, do I have to pick up my suitcase and start walking?
There is still the small matter of you owing us some money, Mrs. Danksler.
How much?
Mr. K, would you mind?
Oh, no, not at all. I don't mean to be in the way. Mrs. Danksler, it was nice meeting you. Regards to your sister in Garden Grove.
Close the door, please.
Sure.
Miss McAllister, I'm waiting.
What do you think you're doing?
Looking for the water cooler.
Under W or C? Mr. K, if you are not off these premises within 5 minutes,
Don't disturb yourself, ma'am. I'm already on my way. The family of Jedediah Callender thanks you very much for your warm-hearted cooperation.
Danksler, Mrs. Jerome G. Amount of life insurance, value of securities, mortgage on house, estimate of personal property, whole life on a file card.
Past and future included.
Widowed, no children, only relatives, sister in Garden Grove, not very bright, no trouble expected. trouble expected.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get a look at Jedediah Calendar's card. I'll bet somebody's written on that one, trouble expected.
That's it. Half a dozen cards with trouble expected on them. And we know where to find some other people who could have killed him. And what we need now is a court order to examine those files.
I wouldn't want to disobey a court order. There's an eighth of a card left.
Let's go, Gabe.
Don't you know that backyard incinerating is against the law? I'm liable to turn you into the APCD. You're starting smog. Do you know that? Well, what are we going into court with tomorrow?
1/8 of a file card. That last phrase, what does that mean? No trouble expected. Would you explain that, please?
Just what it says, no trouble expected.
From whom?
I only carried out Dr. Branby's instructions. He never told me what no trouble expected meant.
I see. Well, then, did you ever prepare any cards under Dr. Branby's instructions containing the words trouble expected?
I really don't remember.
You don't remember? But wouldn't it be logical to assume, Miss McAllister, that if the card in the affidavit contains the phrase no trouble expected, that some, at least some of the cards that were burned yesterday must have contained the words trouble expected? And wouldn't it also be logical to assume that if Dr. Branby felt it necessary to write the words trouble expected on file cards, he must have had a fear that such trouble would occur, which it did?
Your Honor, counsel is not asking questions. He's making his summation.
Mr. Hanson, these remarks properly belong in the presentation of your defense. Have you any further questions to ask this witness?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
You may step down, Miss McAllister. Mr. Jacobs?
Call Edward Sessions, please.
Edward Sessions to the stand. Do you hereby swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please be seated and state your name.
Edward Sessions.
I think there's something I should have told you.
You think there's something you should have told us?
What?
Now, Mr. Sessions, are you aware of the coroner's findings in this case to the effect that the deceased, Dr. Branby, was killed by a gunshot wound inflicted between the hours of 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, sir.
Where were you at that time? Do you recall?
I was in my cottage, the foreman's cottage at River Oaks Ranch. I was asleep.
Were you asleep the whole time?
Except when the car woke me up.
The car?
Yes, sir. A car starting in the garage. Gunning the engine, backing out real fast.
And what did you do?
Got up and went to the window to see what was happening.
That time of night being?
About 1:45, I checked it with my watch.
Did you see the car?
Yes, sir.
Whose car was it?
Miss Calendar's.
Oh, no.
Did you see who was driving Miss Calendar's car?
Yes, sir.
Who?
Miss Calendar.
You're certain? You are certain you saw the defendant, Miss Calendar, leave the ranch at 1:45 on the same day that Dr. Branby was murdered between the hours of 2 and 4?
Yes, sir. She left at 1:45, and she came back about 3:45. I saw her both times.
Well, he's not my foreman anymore. I fired him
When was that?
when he came to see me in jail yesterday. I fire a lot of people when they come to see me in jail.
What did you fire him for?
He tried to shake me down.
What for?
You mean how much or why?
Both.
You want the whole story?
The
prosecution is all finished. They're going to rest their case the minute we get back into the courtroom, and now you're willing to tell us the whole story?
All right, all right. That evening, when I came back from offering Branby $1 million and getting laughed at for my trouble, Ed was the first person I saw. I was steaming mad. And when he asked if there was anything he could do, I guess I started laying off some of that steam.
How?
By saying something stupid.
For instance?
For instance, these aren't the exact words, but something like, Branby just turned down $1 million. Go put a bullet through his skull and it's all yours.
But you did not mean that.
Well, of course I did not mean it. Just because I say stupid things sometimes doesn't mean I'm stupid all the time. But yesterday, Ed showed up in jail and asked for his payoff.
You mean he said that he took you seriously and he killed Branby?
That's what I asked him.
What did he answer to that?
He grinned like some creep and said that wasn't the point. I said, you bet it's not the point. You knew I wasn't serious about that offer. Now get out of here. He said, sure, he'd get out of there. But maybe I better think about how much it was worth for him not to say he woke up in the middle of the night and saw me leave rubber on my way out the gate. That's when I fired him.
Why? Why didn't you tell us about this before?
Because I'd have had to admit I'd been lying about being in the barn all night. And you trusted me. And you believed me. And I just couldn't, that's all.
Oh.
But you did leave. When he said? Where did you go? What did you do?
Yes, I went. Guess where? Back to Sylvan Hill to get Grandpa. I was prepared to do anything, even kill Branby. But before I got there, my head sort of cleared a little, and I realized what an idiot I was being. And it wouldn't help Grandpa or me or anybody. And I'd better cool it like you said and let you and David handle it. So I turned around and went back home. And that's the truth. You can believe me or you can think I'm lying, but that is the whole and complete truth.
Here they come!
Devlin, I don't know who's lying.
Well, do your best to keep your ignorance to yourself.
Something else you don't know, what your first witness is liable to say. I'd better warn you, Mrs. Dengsler, she's a little weird.
Love poured from Dr. Simon like cream from a pitcher. You'd ache to return it. I know. I ache like the others. Sometimes he'd accept some of it back from some of the patients. It drove her distracted.
Excuse me. Her, referring to Miss McAllister?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has given absolutely no indication that the person she was referring to was...
I'll rephrase it. To whom are you referring, Mrs. Dengsler?
Her, the witch, who made your body feel as though it were being ripped bare, McAllister.
Miss McAllister disapproved of Dr. Branby's, I think you called it sharing his love with some of the patients at Sylvan Hill?
Oh, I'd hear them at night. Their voices coming out of the room, right across the courtyard from me.
Just a moment. Let's make this very clear. You're saying that Dr. Branby and Miss McAllister shared living quarters at Sylvan Hill?
Until she made him move to another room.
And when did she do that, do you know?
It was just after the girl died.
You didn't tell me about any girl dying.
She didn't tell me. David, find out what she's talking about and pretend you knew it all the time.
This girl to whom you're referring, the one who died, her name was?
Cynthia Jameson.
Exactly, Cynthia Jameson. Now, I want you to tell the court, as well as you can remember, when this incident occurred and what resulted from it.
It was about 2 months ago. She was a pretty girl. Couldn't have been more than 25. She'd only been there about a week when something happened in the treatment room. McAllister suddenly came hurrying out and had the attendants put us all into our rooms. And that night, later that night, I heard them talking again. She was saying over and over, "Now what do we do? Now what do we do?"
And what did Dr. Branby reply?
He said they're always finding dead girls on the beach at Venice. Let them find one more. About a week later, while I was being wheeled on the front patio, a man drove up. Miss McAllister was there, and she talked to him. He said his name was George Jameson. He'd gotten a letter from his sister, and he wanted to see her.
And what did Miss McAllister reply to this?
She said his sister wasn't there anymore. She'd left some time ago.
Find us George Jameson.
Mrs. Denksler, you're telling us Dr. Branby caused the death of a patient, failed to report that death, secretly disposed of the body, concealed the fact of that death from the victim's brother. Why didn't you report this series of crimes to the police?
And have Dr. Simon arrested? He was curing me.
Miss McAllister, we have called you back to the stand to review certain matters and clarify them that were not sufficiently covered in your previous testimony. Tell me this, please. Do you consider yourself a heavy sleeper or a light sleeper?
I always keep an ear open, just in case I should be needed during the night.
And on the night of Dr. Branby's death, were you needed?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was. At about midnight, I guess, I heard the sound of a walking stick in the corridor. I was afraid it was a sleepwalker, so I went out for a look.
Was it a sleepwalker?
No, it was Mr. Callender. I told him this had been happening much too often. If these midnight strolls continued, I'd lock him in his room at night.
Mr. Callender was in the habit of wandering around at night?
Ever since he'd been able to walk again, we could hardly keep him in his bed at night. It's frequently that way with patients at Sylvan Hill who come thinking they're dying, and then, as a result of the beneficial treatment, they
Thank you, Miss McAllister. We do not need to go into that. You say this happened around midnight?
Yes, that's right.
And where was Dr. Branby at that time?
I've no idea.
Oh, but surely you were aware of his absence.
I'm afraid I don't understand. Absence from where?
From what I believe you referred to in your direct testimony as your quarters.
I did not share my quarters with Dr. Branby.
Oh, Miss McAllister, it has been testified to here by a Mrs. Denksler.
Mrs. Denksler is a lying, senile old fool.
I wasn't able to locate George Jameson, but maybe you can work with this.
Thanks. Miss McAllister, let us test the validity of that last statement. Is that a photograph of Cynthia Jameson?
I believe that it is.
You believe it is? Your Honor, I mark this as Defense Exhibit A. It is a newspaper dated September 17, containing a photograph just identified by the witness as being that of Cynthia Jameson. Beneath is a caption reading, "Body of dead girl identified." The article goes on to state that the police have finally been able to identify the body of a young girl found 2 weeks previously on the beach at Venice.
Accepted. The clerk will mark.
Miss McAllister, is it not a fact that Dr. Branby's will names you as the sole beneficiary?
Yes. But that's because...
Yes, that's all right. Go on.
That's because he felt I was the only one he could trust to carry out these treatments.
Is that the only reason he left his entire fortune to you?
I believe so.
Oh, you believe so? Your Honor, I mark this Defense Exhibit B. It is the last will and testament of Dr. Simon Branby, in which he leaves everything he owns to Maribel McAllister. The will is dated September 18, just one day before that dead body was found by the police.
Accepted. The clerk will mark.
Great. Well, what's the difference? I mean, what good does it do our client?
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. How can we expect to prove Kate's innocence by showing Branby and McAllister as a couple of ghouls who dumped dead broads on the beach at night? There's testimony in the record that Kate Callender left home in a hurry the night Branby was murdered, before he was murdered, that she came back after he was murdered, and that is hanging testimony, my boy, and blackening McAllister's morals will not change that. What we should have done was to cop that plea when we had the chance. What are you doing?
Jedediah.
What?
What was Jedediah doing? Clomping around there in the middle of the night.
He came to my room that evening. Dr. Simon did. It was about 7:30, quarter to 8. It was real puzzling. He didn't usually come around and see anybody that late. What he had to say to me was a shocker. Pack up, he told me. Pack up and get out. At first, I didn't believe him. I said, why? He said it was on account of my granddaughter and her friends and her lawyers and how there were a lot of people coming around asking questions and making trouble. Then he didn't want any trouble. And he said that I was the cause of it all. So I had to pack up and get out. By the very next morning, I had to get out.
And what did you do then, Mr. Callender?
Well, I just laid there. I don't know how long. But then I decided I'd get down and talk to him. I decided I'd plead with him to let me stay there. I'd offer him more money. And I'd promise he'd never have anybody bother him again, Kate or nobody. And that nobody would give him any trouble again. And then I got out of bed and started down to his office.
Did you see anyone?
Yes, McAllister. She came out of her room and told me to get back to bed. That I was breaking the rules being up that late.
And what time was that?
12 o'clock, maybe a little later.
Did you go back to your room then?
Oh, yeah, I went back. And I waited. I waited till I figured she was asleep. Then I came out again, and I walked real soft this time. Sneaked past her room.
And you went where?
To Dr. Simon's office. He was in there.
Alive?
Oh, yeah. He was alive, all right.
And what time would you say it was by then?
It was quarter after 2. There was a clock on his desk. That's what it said, quarter after 2. I pleaded with him to let me stay, but he got mad and began to curse me and said he didn't want to hear anything more about it, and that I just had to get out.
What did you do then?
Well, I had a gun in the pocket of my bathrobe.
You had a gun? Where did you get that?
I'm an old rancher, Mr. McNeil, and well, whenever I travel, I always take a gun from the ranch and put it in my suitcase.
All right, Mr. Callender, go on. You had the gun in your bathrobe.
Well, I took the gun out then, and I pointed it at him. I told him he had to listen to me, that he had to cure me, and that I wasn't going to let him put me out, let me die. Or maybe he'd die, too.
And how did he respond to that?
He laughed. He just laughed. Then he started to come around his desk and walk toward me. He was talking very low. He told me to put the gun down, give it to him. He said my arm was getting heavy and that I was getting very weak. I couldn't pull the trigger. He kept walking toward me all the time until the muzzle of the gun was right up against him. And he kept looking me right in the eye. And then he said again that I didn't have the strength to pull the trigger. Well, I pulled the trigger, and I killed him. I shot him dead.
That's impossible. He couldn't have. No, Your Honor, my grandfather's making this up to protect me. He thinks I did it.
Mr. Hanson, restrain your client.
Oh, don't you worry, Kate. I did it all right. I know what I'm talking about. I shot him dead. Then, after, I went across the hall to the kitchen and put the gun in one of the garbage cans. I knew they'd be collected in the morning and they'd be gone by the time the police got there to search for a murder weapon. And then I just went up to bed. I was tired.
Thank you, Mr. Callender. No further questions, Your Honor?
I still say I can't believe it.
Well, the jury did. They accepted your grandfather's confession, and they acquitted you, and that's what counts, Kate.
What are they going to do with him?
Well, let's look at it this way. What do you do with an old man who's gone to the hospital to get W14 injections? You just sit and wait, right?
The main point is they've closed down Sylvan Hill and are holding Miss McAllister in connection with the girl's death. Kate, you just enjoy being free.
I will. Should I call you up the next time one of my mares folds? You can sit up with me. And then if anything lousy happens that night, you'll know at least I didn't do it.
Sure, it's a date.